If I can be forgiving, kind, accepting, and loving towards myself, who is I and who is myself? And how does that I differ from the I that judges and criticizes? What do we experience when we travel from one to the next? What do we experience when we go from judgment, criticism, rejection, to forgiveness, kindness, acceptance, love? What changes? And I would argue that that veil, that false sense of who you are, gets out of the way. And then the true essence of compassion and love can move forward and can radiate through. Hi, I'm Ricky Duriz. Welcome to episode 54 of the Mind That Ego podcast. This episode features my presentation, Quantum Self-Compassion, for the Mystics and Scientists Conference in April 2024. The theme was love, forgiveness, and compassion, where spirituality meets science. The first half of the talk introduced self-compassion as a thread across past, present, and future. I share common barriers to self-compassion, uncover misconceptions, and look at the damage of self-discompassion, which includes self-rejection, self-judgment, and self-criticism. I introduce the notion of the true self as outside of time and the source of compassion, love, forgiveness, and higher qualities we can extend towards the small self, or ego. To bring these insights to life, this is followed by a guided meditation through which you will hopefully get an embodied sense of the nature of self-compassion. Just a reminder to please like, rate, subscribe, and share to help more people access the podcast. Enjoy. This is quantum self-compassion because in this experiential journey, we're going to explore the nature of time as non-linear as part of this exploration. And I'll explain more of that in detail shortly. But to begin, so to look at self-compassion, I'd like you to consider initially, what beliefs do you have about self-compassion? Do you hold any beliefs about self-compassion? Do you have a self-compassion practice? Is putting self next to the word compassion absurd to you, or is it something that comes natural? We tend to have our own belief system around self-compassion and around our nature of deserving compassion, and how we also apply that to ourselves, essentially. Some of the misconceptions that we have around self-compassion end up causing us to create blockages within ourselves. We have control over the nature of compassion that we direct to ourselves. But if we hold on to certain misconceptions, there's a risk that we block that off. We cut ourselves off from that. So some of the common misconceptions with self-compassion, the first one is that self-compassion is self-indulgence, that it becomes very self-centered, that it's something that you kind of let yourself off the hook. You maybe don't push yourself so much. You maybe become neurotic, narcissistic even, in the sense of giving yourself compassion. It's kind of paradoxical because the more compassionate you are to yourself, the more you're able to connect to other people. An additional misconception there, so self-compassion makes you weak or passive. The opposite is true. Another misconception that self-compassion is selfish, which is similar to self-indulgence, but obviously the connection to other people is really important. One really common belief that people have, and I do want to hat tip Kristen Neff, because a lot of her work around self-compassion, she's a researcher, she's done an abundance of work. She looks at the fallacies that people hold, and this is one of the biggest, that criticism makes you productive, or it pushes you to succeed or not mess up. And one of the biggest takeaways from Kristen Neff's research is that the opposite is true, that this is, again, a misconception. So the paradox is that usually the people that feel that they don't deserve compassion are the ones that need it the most. The people that feel like, oh, this is a bit of a luxury, often are the ones that are the most harsh to themselves. So the reality and the application of self-compassion as a practice is that there's a definite balance between self-compassion being both sensitive. This is referred to as the yin and yang by Kristen Neff. There's an aspect that is very nurturing. There's an aspect of meeting yourself in that way, of caring for yourself. But then there's also a dimension to that that is firm, it's action oriented. And if we keep in mind, the definition of compassion to alleviate suffering, if there's something that you are not taking action on, and as a result, that's causing suffering, self-compassion would be encouraging yourself to take action. So this is again um, going against the common misconception of self-compassion. As a result, it builds strength, it builds resilience. If you're supportive and you're encouraging of yourself, you're actually more likely to meet life's challenges and to overcome hardship. Um, Again, it increases compassion for other people. Like the more that you can get to know yourself in a compassionate way, the more you can find an underlying common humanity in a way that can help you then empathize and have compassion for others. It could be that you understand when feeling a certain way, there are certain actions that really help, and you might then be able to apply those same actions to other people. And something that I really want to look at in this workshop, in this session, is to understand that compassion, this isn't something that we just find from outside of ourselves. I know this is a theme that has been covered and spoken of a number of times in this conference. Compassion is your nature. It's beyond the beliefs that you hold. It's beyond the certain thoughts that you have, even your identity. And crucially, it's beyond what I've called here your heart armor, like the way that we can harden ourselves when we get hurt. We can become bitter, close off our emotions, feel a little bit too vulnerable. And actually, the truth is that whenever you feel compassion for someone else, that's coming from within you. That's an inner experience directed to someone, that's symbolizing, almost giving you a green light to feel compassion through that process. To understand this more, I want to look at the self-discompassionate relationship. So what does it look like if we're not compassionate towards ourselves? There are three key elements to this if we're being discompassionate. The first one is judgment. So being highly judgmental towards, and I've put here towards all aspects of being. So it can be being very judgmental towards your thoughts. If you're a spiritual person, if you meditate, there's a chance that you might start judging certain thoughts as unspiritual. This can happen as the inner criteria of what is good/bad can cause you to judge your inner experience. It could be related to your emotions. I shouldn't feel anxious. I shouldn't feel shame. I shouldn't feel dejected. I should be upbeat. I should be happy. It can be towards physical appearance, behavior, action, many different aspects of everything related to your self-image. And the question that I've left here is, which I can't actually fully see the screen. If I can direct judgment, criticism, or rejection towards myself, who is I and who is myself? And I want to just let that land for a second. If I can direct judgment, criticism, or rejection towards myself, who is I and who is myself? So this is a huge breakthrough in understanding the dynamics of relating to oneself. Often this self-discompassionate relationship comes from beliefs, judgments, criticisms that are internalized, either through direct comments or direct experiences that you have with other people, through your upbringing, how you're raised, through with your parents and guardians, your peers as you grow up. It could even be that a perspective that you have on something that happened is then internalized and amplified. So it's not uncommon that you might have an experience that someone says something unkind to you years ago, and you end up internalizing it to the degree that when you behave or you think or you feel in a similar way that led to that comment, you might actually replay a similar comment to yourself in that moment. And that's what the internalized process is. These, without being challenged and without being mindful, these become habits. It becomes an habitual way of relating to yourself. So a key part of the chain of breaking the chain with self-compassion is just noticing when am I being self-critical? When am I rejecting myself? When am I judging myself? There are many different aspects, but just noticing is the beginning, the key. Again, within internalization, this is often where rejection and criticism comes in. Self-rejection is one of the most damaging potential ways of relating to yourself. Like if you end up rejecting yourself, preemptively rejecting yourself in a myriad of different ways, you end up as the most intimate relationship, the relationship you have with yourself is the most intimate. And if that's an unkind, unloving relationship, it can really lead to a lot of difficulty, even depression, anxiety, and these kind of challenging experiences can be fueled and increased by this way of relating to yourself. Returning to this question, if I can direct judgment, criticism, or rejection towards myself, who is I and who is myself? I would argue that the source, that in this sense, the I is the small self or the ego. The construct of experiences, memories, beliefs, thoughts, even emotions that create a self-image that is held as a concept of who you are, that almost interferes with the process of expressing compassion, being accepting of yourself, and essentially interfere in the way that you relate from a truer place. There's like a barrier that gets in between. So as a result of that, cultivating the true self, this is a this is terminology that is used in so many different ways. We might say higher self, essence, soul, spirit. In Hinduism, it's Atman. In Buddhism, it's no self. Um, but cultivating this connection is the key to self-compassion. Again, to return to this idea that compassion is your nature. Compassion is who you are because it's an expression of love. And as a result, it's not something that we have to get from outside, but something we cultivate from within. And ultimately, in this process, what we're doing is we're reorienting ourselves to a new self-compass. Part of the reason I put that there is because it's self-compassion with a few less letters, which I found quite fun. But this idea of an inner compass, something that can guide us, that isn't cool, that isn't judging, that isn't rejecting, that is based in a truer connection to our essence, so to speak. To look to the flip side of this, so what does a self-compassionate relationship look like? A self-compassionate relationship is self-forgiving. There's a lot of space, there's a lot of forgiveness in perceived failings, perceived mishaps. There's a certain element of kindness in that relationship. Like you're on your side, like you've got your own back, that you're not beating yourself up for making mistakes or being imperfect. There's an element of acceptance. So again, so much suffering and suffering in this context, when I use this, is very much related to the Buddhist idea of suffering. So you have the two arrows. Life is painful. We lose people that we love. We hurt ourselves. We experience loss. That's pain. That's unavoidable. We all age. We all die. At the same time, suffering is avoidable. And that's the second arrow, the arrow that we ourselves end up striking ourselves with when we're not being accepting, when we're not being kind, when we're not being forgiving. And ultimately, aligning with the theme of this year's conference, all of these are expressions of love. So this is a growing embodiment of loving oneself, not from the egoic kind of commodified idea of what it means to love oneself, but actually to cultivate these qualities towards all aspects of the self. Um, and again, like the result of this, and I can attest to this, I can attest to this as someone who, for many different reasons, has been incredibly self-discompassionate. Like I'm in more of an expert at that than I am at self-compassion. It's second nature to me. So I have to do a lot of work in overcoming the fact that I can be my own worst enemy. And I think the realization of that, it is a double-edged sword. Because on one hand, you're like, oh, I'm my own worst enemy. That's not good at all. On the other, I've got more control over myself than anyone else in the world by far. So it means that if I realize I'm my own worst enemy and I can transform that relationship, I'm empowering myself. So self-compassion is an act of empowerment. And as a result, again, this is something I can attest to from both applying self-compassion, not applying self-compassion, and noticing the difference between the two. It really does help with emotional regulation, reducing suffering, creating resilience and a sense of internal support, and accepting imperfection. Unfortunately, all of us are imperfect. And the more that we crave perfection, the more we create suffering because we create standards that we're not living up to. Um, so within this framework, again, like just to reiterate with compassion, compassion is the desire to take action to alleviate suffering. It's empathy plus that desire to alleviate suffering. So not only to feel oneself, but to actually take action. So you could say that this is love in action. And again, returning to a similar exploration, if I can be forgiving, kind, accepting, and loving towards myself, who is I and who is myself? If I can be forgiving, kind, accepting, and loving towards myself, who is I and who is myself? And how does that I differ from the I that judges and criticizes? What do we experience when we travel from one to the next? What do we experience when we go from judgment, criticism, rejection to forgiveness, kindness, acceptance, love? What changes? And I would argue that that veil, that false sense of who you are, gets out of the way. And then the true essence of compassion and love can move forward and can radiate through. Again, like looking at the self as the higher self, as Atman in Jungian psychology, and this is a big strand of my interest in depth psychology, is very much of a Jungian flavor. The self archetype is beyond all of our general psychic material. It's beyond how we usually relate. I've included this image of the Flammarion engraving. This is said to symbolize not only synchronicity, but the ability to see beyond the veil. The self isn't always accessible. And I think this is something to remember, that, you know, at times we forget ourselves, and we have to remember at times we need help to remember ourselves. The self is, to use this Jungian framework, mostly unconscious. It's a guiding force, not it's unconscious, but it's actually more influential than the small self. But as a result, we can start to look at the self not only as the source of compassion, love, kindness, which applies to ourselves and to other people. We can turn to it as a resource, something that we can actually look to in moments of hardship. I was at the Carolyn Miss talk yesterday, and she says about this with faith, to first begin with faith in oneself. I'm going to include a quote from a Jungian analyst, Marie-Louise von Franz. The various ages the self assumes show not only that it is with us throughout the whole of life, but also that it exists beyond the consciously realized flow of life, which is what creates our experience of time. Just as the self is not entirely contained in our conscious experience of time, in our space-time dimension, it is also simultaneously omnipresent. So again, this idea, and this very much aligns with Buddhism and Hinduism and a lot of mystical schools, the self is beyond what we experience as our day-to-day. It's outside of that. And to tap into this, I'll ask you another question of, can you remember a time when a sense of acceptance, clarity, kindness, or love arose from within, no matter how subtle and no matter how fleeting, but in a way that kind of took you by surprise? It could be in a moment of being really harsh to yourself, a moment where you feel downbeat, and all of a sudden there's a sense of presence of, there's something within me that's beyond my conscious experience. This idea of the self being outside of time and it's linked to self-compassion is something that we're going to explore shortly in the meditation. But here I'm suggesting that compassion can be a thread across time. That if the self, which is the source of compassion and love and kindness and forgiveness, not only towards ourselves, but to others, and potentially the source of compassion and love and kindness that we all experience as part of the same pool, the same ocean. If the self is outside of time, can the self extend compassion to past, present, and future versions of you, creating a feedback loop? And I've said here of service and gratitude. This can be as simple, and if this does sound a bit abstract at the moment, this can be as simple as cooking yourself a meal and enjoying it the next day, and then thinking, oh, I'm really happy that yesterday I cooked for myself. I'm enjoying the fruits of yesterday's action. So there's an act of service and an act of gratitude. When we look at self-discompassion or the self-discompassionate relationship, that can show up in relation to time. So the narrative that we experience, the consciously realized flow of life, when in the past as regret, anger or resentment, disappointment, shame, denial, judgment of our life story and what we've done, maybe even feelings of grief around a life that we've not lived. When we go to the future, we might experience self-doubt. If there's a goal that we have in mind, something we want to experience in life, that self-critical voice can leave us feeling doubtful. Or if we have an opportunity, and if we're on the road to achieving our dreams, or even just a life of joy or abundance, or something so subtle as a good day, we might end up self-sabotaging. That's an act of self-discompassion. We might have perfectionist ideas of what we can achieve. We might have self-imposed limitations, add unfair commentary towards our life, and really think in absolutes. I will never be able to do this. That's not who I am. Even when there's a deeper desire and a deeper sense of this is something that I want, a voice comes in. That's not something I can achieve. So all of these are deserving of compassion in this kind of loop of past, present, and future. And I encourage you to consider if there are areas in life where you're fixated on the past, denying the present, or limiting your future. In the present moment, this often surfaces as judgment of emotions, resistance. Shame spirals is just a description I give into when we kind of collapse because we're punishing ourselves for something, and it creates this feedback loop. Not only that, any of the weight of past and future can also be added on top of that. So on to the experiential journey. This is a meditation. And what I encourage you to do is to really sit back, take a moment to relax. To close your eyes I'll give a few moments for this transition just to let anything land, but don't worry about having to keep up intellectually. Just taking a few deep breaths just to relax into the body. Feeling the weight of the body. Big in breath, big out breath. Noticing any areas of tension that you're holding in your body. Feeling the weight of your feet on the floor, your lap in the chair. Just beginning this meditation by being as present as you can be, noticing any thoughts that arise. I'd like you to pay attention to the space around your heart and your chest. And if there's any tension, that's fine. Just see if you can relax that space as you continue breathing. Relaxing the body as best you can. And you might want to actually put your hand on your heart, if that's something that feels good, just to make this connection. This is not an intellectual journey. We're going to use the creativity of imagination, the power of the word. Having that gentle awareness on your heart space, any energy, any tension. And before we begin, I just want to say that there's absolutely no expectation on you for this journey. There is no place that you have to go. If you feel distracted, that's okay. Just see, just be curious. We're just bringing curiosity to the experience. You might want to take one more deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. So to begin our journey, I'd like you to bring to mind someone who makes you smile. Someone who makes you feel loved and accepted. This can be anyone. Just bringing that person to mind. And just noticing how that surfacing in your imagination, how that feels in the body, how that feels in your heart. It might be that you remember a particular moment in your life where that love and acceptance felt palpable. You received that from someone. And any emotions that arise are welcome. And just be curious to how that feels in your heart. And now I'd like you to bring to mind someone that you love and you accept. Again, no pressure, no expectation. If nothing comes to mind, that's also okay. Just being curious. Again, maybe this is a particular moment where you felt empathy, love, acceptance, joy. It can be any being as well. It could even be a pet, it could be a loved one. It could be witnessing an act of kindness and empathy that allowed you to feel that way. Really just invite that feeling in, really bathe in that feeling. Really connect to what those sensations feel like. You can see if you can amplify that. It might help to visualize a white light around your heart as you connect to that feeling of compassion and empathy. But again, it could be very subtle, so there's no need to force the experience. So now we're going to, from this space, we're going to time travel. That's what we're going to do. We're going to time travel. Again, using the creativity of our imaginations, the timelessness of our hearts and our souls, and the power of the word. So now I'd like you to bring to mind something that you did in the past that you're judging yourself harshly for. Doesn't matter how significant or insignificant, just something that you've done in the past that you're judging yourself for. Maybe you feel you hurt someone. Maybe you behaved in a way that you regret. Maybe you're even critical of the emotions that you felt, the thoughts that you had. It's more of an inner experience. But just notice how that feels in the body. And just note it's okay if anxiety arises, if anger arises, frustration. Just be present and curious to what emotions surface when you connect to that memory of something that you've done, where you feel yourself judging yourself harshly. Now, in your own time, you can say this inwardly, or you can say it out loud as a whisper, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'd like you to say, I forgive you. I forgive you. See if you can connect to the underlying vulnerability that caused you to behave in that way. It's not necessarily condoning anything, but just to release some of that judgment. Maybe you've replayed this moment numerous times and caused yourself suffering through the lack of forgiveness, through being hard on yourself. And it's okay that that judgment's there. It's okay that that lack of forgiveness is there. This is about noticing what you're holding on to emotionally. It's okay to struggle to let go, to struggle to forgive. But you don't have to hold on to that going forwards. And you can repeat the sentence with the knowledge of the suffering caused from that judgment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And again, just bring curiosity to your body, mind, and heart as you move through this experience and you express. It could be that these sentences for you, they're more just a feeling of forgiveness, just paying attention to how that feels. And now I'd like you to bring to mind a version of you that you feel that you've lost. This might be how you showed up during a period of your life, a certain quality you feel you're not embodying at the moment. Just bring into mind a version of you feel that you've lost. Holding that image, the lost self in mind, and whatever memories arise. I'd like you to repeat the sentence, I miss you. I miss you. Again, not putting pressure on yourself to follow this in any way. Now, I'd like for you to bring to mind something that you did in the past that your present self has benefited from. It could even be choosing to attend this event to nourish your intellect, your heart, your soul. Maybe you've invested in your health, your finances, and your friendships. This can be anything that you've done in the past that your present day self has benefited from. It could even be that in the past you suffered to get to where you are. Maybe you needed resilience and discipline to lead you here, right now. Maybe you had days where hope was all you had, hardship was all you felt, but you kept going. As you hold this in mind, without judging what surfaces, in your own time, you can repeat the sentence, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for staying strong for me, for thinking of me. Thank you. Again, noticing feelings, bringing curiosity to how it feels. Now, I'd like you to bring to mind a future version of you. So I'm going to travel through the imagination from memory. This version of you is happy, fulfilled, nourished, relaxed. because of all the choices and kindness given to it from this moment to that moment. This version of you is grateful. I want you to imagine, if you can, this future version of you thanking you from the future. Thank you for thinking of me. As you hold this future version in mind, consider them a close friend. How can you empower them to reach their goals, to live the life they wish to live? What small acts will make their life easier? And in your own time, you can repeat the sentences as you hold that future vision of you in mind. I will protect you. I will fight for you. I will keep you safe. I will care for you. I will create you with my thoughts, my actions, my attitude. Again, being curious to how this feels in the body and what visions come to mind. Now I'd like you to, again, we're going back in time. I'd like you to bring to mind something you're proud of. Something a past version of you achieved. Something you didn't think you'd be able to do, but proved yourself wrong. Can you apply that to something in life, an area of life where you currently have self-doubt? Something you'd like to do but don't think you're able to achieve. Maybe it's too daring, too courageous, not something you can dare to dream of. Consider proving yourself wrong. Again, not worrying about keeping up with this, just being curious to your experience. It could be that I'm moving too quickly in time, and that's okay as well. Just pay attention to what you feel. As we enter a timeless space to meet the self beyond the consciously realized flow of life, the self that was with you the moment you were conceived and will be with you the moment you die and beyond, the eternal self, the most intimate relationship you'll ever have, the source of compassion, the source of forgiveness, the source of love. In your own time, and repeat the sentence, I love you. And just see how that feels. I love you. Feel it in the body. If I love you, who is I? Who is you? Maybe there's tenderness. Maybe there's determination. Maybe there's joy. And if you can connect to a feeling of kindness as gently, as subtly as possible, or jubilantly, if this meditation's going well, Again, you can hold the visualization of a white light that might embody compassion and love. As we extend this now beyond your individual self to everyone present here today, not only all people, but all versions of all people, past, present, future selves, to extend kindness, to extend compassion to this group, to those watching the recording, maybe to any speaker that you've resonated with that has supported you across this weekend. Just to share those positive feelings, expressions of kindness, goodwill, with a shared intention for us all together to explore a new paradigm, the intent to do better, to create a better world of love and forgiveness. In your own time, you might want to repeat the sentence, thank you. Thank you. And as we bring this meditation and this session to a close, as a practice of loving kindness, I again have more sentences for you. So I really do hope you like sentences. In the spirit of metta bhavana, Buddhist loving kindness, you might want to repeat, may we all be happy. May we all be safe. May we all be nourished. May we all live life fully. May we be uniquely ourselves and uniquely supportive of each other. May our fierce hearts, fierce minds, fierce spirits lead us forward with kindness into uncharted territory of worlds dreamt and imagined, worlds of love, worlds of forgiveness, worlds of compassion, worlds of peace. One step at a time, return into sanity as we dare to dream these worlds into reality. And now just bringing yourself back into the room that you're in, into the space, feeling of weight, your body, where you're sitting. Any sounds? Maybe another in-breath and out-breath to close. And you're in your own time, when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes.